Hi everyone, welcome to my Shoreline studio. I'm Sybil Muschik. Behind the camera is Joshua Blanc. Today we're continuing on with our work with trace monotypes and the subsequent working with the gel plate. And I want to show you a little bit about color mixing with the oil printing inks. Now I have two kinds. I have the Daniel Smith oil-based relief ink, and very similar, but probably not as fine a quality as that, is the Shiva, an oil-based block printing ink. And it's a little different working with these. They're a little bit tacky, and they dry when they're come in contact with paper, so they stay wet quite a long time, so you don't have to worry about the paint drying on your on your little palette here. Now, also, we're still working with some design principles. So far, we've been working with line, and to some degree, we're still working with line, but now we're morphing into shape. And we have images for you here. This is the Roddy Creek Ranch out West Fraser Road in the Quesnel area. And at certain times of the year, April, mid-April usually, when there's still snow on the ground, the geese and the swans, these are trumpeter swans, they come through, feed if they can, rest, whatever, they're on their way north. And they don't stay here very long. So by the time the snow's melted and the ground is nice and brown, you won't see them. And of course, in amongst them, of course, are the Canada geese, and you can see quite a difference in the size. So this is something I wanted to sort of portray in the work that we're doing today. And I've had to use a couple of images to create the image that I want. Now here is the trumpeter swan, just flexing his wings, shaking them off, I suppose, and maybe looking very imposing, trying to press all the girl swans. And the ones with the more yellowish necks, like this one here, and this one here, are probably males. Now, I'm not sure the one standing up is male. Maybe it's a female that's trying to impress a guy, so I don't know. Whatever. And then, of course, there's a little tiny Canada goose, which is not a tiny bird at all, but the trumpeter swans are just enormous. These back here are the hoodoos that are along the banks of the Fraser River, and I just love the color and the striations here. And, of course, the corn field, old cornfield, probably for the cows. Now we also want to think about design. We have done the cruciform, I think was the last one we did. Now today we're going to be doing strata. So this is a perfect example of something with stratifications. Now the strata here, this is the snow, and then this is the corn strata. And then here are all these lines across the hoodoos are more striations. So that's perfect for our exercise tutorial today. To begin with, because we're starting with these oil-based printmaking inks, we will put some out and we'll try and replicate the colors that we see in this composition. Now then, I'm just going to start. This is a transparent medium, and you can add this to any of the colors, especially if they happen to be a little bit more thick than the others. They're not always the same consistency. Now, I have no idea what the name of this is. It's a type of orange, but it's almost like a burnt sienna. So it's a deep orange and probably fairly opaque, which we will need for the corn. And a little bit of red. We're going to be mixing our own. I don't have black in this group of printmaking inks, so we're going to mix our own black, or as close as we're going to get. We have some phthalo blue, and you don't need a lot. The nice thing about these printing inks is that they're very, very transparent. So if you like really soft passages, luminous passages. Now we're ultramarine here. So when you put the paint on, it's very transparent. The yellow, even the yellow has a great deal of transparency, which is strange with me, that because it's usually a cad kind of color, a cadmium, which is not transparent, it's opaque. So by mixing some of these opaque ones, maybe we'll keep these together, we should get a little less transparency in the areas where we don't want it. Now in the hills we do want it, and but in the foreground we're going to use the blues, and I have some work to show you. Now this was the first one, and this is what I mean about beautiful transparency. These background tones could be worked on. It's a little bit pale. Then maybe I went a little too far, and I worked in it afterwards because this is a trace monotype. You can see the lines from the tracing. And then you work in afterwards with paint. And this was the one I did last night. And I made stencils of the geese and then put them on before I rolled everything out. And then this was, well, it's cheating a bit because instead of the trace monotype, I put what was remained on the gel plate and printed that. If you put that print, once you've done the tracing, and then put it to the gel plate, this is the kind of thing that happens. So you can work with it. I mean, it's interesting, but this is more like what happens. The gel plate, if you put a plexiplate on it, will have little spots where there's air bubbles, and you can really see. If you look really, really closely, you'll see the geese in there somewhere. But it's more of an abstract, and you can work with it. And here's another example. You just don't get imagery that way. Here's again, I was closer on this one. And of course then it's in white, though, because you've done the tracing already. But we won't do it like that today. I don't want to confuse anybody. But it is great fun, I'm telling you, to just mess around with this stuff. So we're about to mix our colors here. Now, we're going to try and make a black, and just start with a little bit of ultramarine. You can add a little bit of extender if you want, just so you see that it's ultramarine. There we go. And keep a paper towel handy so that you can wipe as you go. Now, we know from elementary school our primaries, red, yellow, and blue, and when you mix the complements of each primary, you will get a neutral or a gray. And if you take it a step further, you will get as close to a black as you can get. And there are many blacks as well. So we're going to take just a titch on the end here, and we're going to add some of our phthalo. That will make it a bit cooler. And you can see the change in color. Then we're going to add some of the red. That's our complement to the greeny color that we've created. Now we'll just take it, and you can see it's still blue to some degree, but it's closer to what we want. in our imagery. We'll add a little bit more. We want to head it towards the neutral. Nice thing about oil is that you can do stages, whereas you can't really do it with acrylic so easily because it'll dry on you. See, now we've got a little bit too much of the red because now we're getting a violet. So back up you go. Add that back in. You've just darkened that shade. Now we're going to add some of that burnt sienna orange. Now we should be heading towards the neutral a bit more now. And you can play back and forth until you get the desired shade here. I'll just go back into our phthalo blue. Oh, my bad, it's phthalo green. I kind of wondered there for a bit, but that's even better. Okay. Now, you can see now that we're pretty dark and we have pretty close to a black. So that's the color we're going to use, and that's for our trace monotype. But first of all, we are going to do the background and so we have a little more color mixing. Going back to our imagery here. So we're close to this on the, I'm going to add a bit of white. We'll have to put that out yet. And so we get, and a bit of the yellow to get that sort of taupe color. Here's our titanium white. This is a very opaque color. And we'll mix that one later. Now, what we want is that blue. So ultramarine blue. And a little bit of the white. Now I'm going to go a little darker than I normally would. I will add just a touch of the green. We have to be really careful with this, just to cool it down. I want a nice opaque tone, but it's got to be fairly light, light at the same time. You'll have to excuse my voice. I'm at the tail end of a nasty flu. It's getting there. Okay, a little bit more blue. So this is how you get to gauge the colors that you want. I think we're pretty close. So let's roll that up and we'll get it on the plate. And before we do that, I'm going to just mark off where everything is. And the way to do that is to put this underneath. So I'm placing my little stencils that I cut. This is mineral paper, it's called, and you can make fairly delicate cuts with it. Okay, and this one reminded me of a ballerina. A dance. Well, the whole thing looks like a dance, doesn't it? Okay, now we should be able to roll that glue over top. Nice thing about gel plate that things will stick to it. So we don't need a huge slab to roll our inks out. We're just a small, because it's a small area. You just want a nice even consistency, so you keep rolling. And usually when you get to the point where it's just right, there's a tiny, tiny snick. If it sounds like it's a wet snick, I know that sounds strange, but whatever, it's too much paint. Now, if it's more of a dry snick, is that a good printing terminology? Then you can just hear it. And you can see the consistency of the paint is very smooth and even. So you roll and roll, roll until that's what you get. And then you can roll it on there. Now, we're going to be rolling right over top of these guys. And hopefully they don't pull up. Oh, they will pull up. I think what I'll do is that little one will roll up, we will roll the paint first, and then we will place the stencils. If they were bigger, that wouldn't be a problem, but we have to do what we have to do. All right. We want this just dark enough so that the geese will show up in relief. So keep adding color until you're happy with the opaqueness of it, or the tone. We'll be outlining the birds anyway, so it's not a huge deal. But you want a nice tone. Okay, let's try this again. This will be much easier. Try not to touch the paint on the rest of the surface if you can help it, because your fingerprints will show. There we go. You'll be painting details anyway later. So this is position. Brayer off your color on your brayer off sheet here, and actually those look fantastic. I have one here and I've brayered off, and it's going to be very interesting to use for something else. So now we get our, we'll start with this orangey color. And we'll add a bit of yellow. And then we'll go to the photograph and see if we can match up a little bit. Now what I'm going to do is add a tiny, tiny bit of that phthalo green. We'll warm it up a little bit. So we get kind of a brownish yellow tone. And I think we're pretty good here. Maybe a tiny bit of yellow. I don't want to lighten it too much because it's not going to work when you roll it out. It's going to be too pale. So you do have to adjust a little bit for that. Yeah, we can roll it out right here. Now we have the marks where that field of corn starts. And we're going to go right over top of the goose, well, the swan actually. I'm going to just take an edge of the yellow here. And we're going to do a tricky maneuver with a brayer. You know, it's a good tool on its own, and there's things you can do with it. And you just sort of put it in like that. We'll adjust it again a little bit after we do the top. So this actually, between this and this, will give us our background tone. So what we're going to do, we'll roll this out. Now that is a really yummy black. I'm rolling it up and down rather than sideways because it gives more of the character of those background hoodoos. And then the very last thing we're going to do is do a trace monotype over top. Okay. So I'm still rolling out the black. We've done the background pretty good. Now to get some details in the corn, so we just go back on our edges here. And here and there we're going to just touch up. And this is why I didn't roll the background first. You want to do this final little moments, corn moments. Yeah. Okay. A little bit of brayer magic. And then roll that off. Now we should be able to print this. We can take the geese off. Goose, actually, and these are all trumpeter swans. And we'll print this first layer. So I've basically done everything in one step, so all that's left is adding the final details. And we'll do a trace monotype to get the details of the background hoodoos. Now the nice thing about the gel plate when you're doing this kind of printmaking is you don't need an etching press. It will print perfectly well without it. And so just about anybody can do this kind of printmaking. And we'll see what we have. Yes. The geese are a little bit obscure, and the swans, but we have placement, so all we need to do now is outline them. Okay, so, and we might do a trace monotype of that too. So now we have our hoodoos really nice, and the, whatever that is, the corn. Very interesting. So on to our trace monotype. Now, we're going to need this black color again. I'm going to move a few things. And we're going to actually trace off the hoodoos. So this time I'm rolling out quite a bit more black. Same procedure as last time, the red, the green, a little bit of that orange color. And we're going to cover the whole plate because we've got to redraw everything. Now we'll fast forward that, and you know, you don't need to watch me drawing this for an hour or so. And that will give us the details. And once we get the trace monotype, we put that back on the gel plate. I think we need it just a little bit more of the red into that green. And maybe a touch of the yellow. That's better. You want the black to be quite intense because you need all those details for the trace monotype to work. I know this is all a bit of a process, but the results are so worth it, and it doesn't take as long as you think. Now we're going to put the trace monotype on there after we get all this off. All right, so now we're putting on just copy paper, because all we're doing is tracing our image. Just make sure it's lined up. Tracing down. You're going to have to, so it doesn't slide all over the place, you're going to have to tape that a little bit. So just carefully tape everything down. Do your best not to touch any of the surface, otherwise that will leave a mark behind. And then for this, Josh will put on some music. We're going to be tracing away for a bit, so we'll take some time. And I'm just going to redraw my drawing. And so we have these layers, right? The first layer was our spraying paint. Then the next layer is our trace monotype layer, and the top one is our drawing. So here we go. Now try and keep your hands like this away from everything. So I'm just going to start from the side. And you can add as many details as you want at this point. You can even go back and forth to give it some tone. It will pick that up. Try not to use your place. If you have a bridge, that might help. I don't really need it at this point, but if you have a larger piece, then a bridge so you don't touch the surface is a good idea. So these lines also explore that idea of the strata, all these ridges. And then as far as, because we already have a fair amount of detail, just to show you again, in the base, then we don't need a lot of line work. And then starting from the goose, Canada goose. So with the tracing, we can actually give a bit of tone here so that the neck looks three-dimensional. Just with the tracing, it looked fairly flat. It's amazing what contortions they can do with their necks. Okay, let's do this group first, and then we'll finish off with our big swan. So just finishing off with the main swan. Putting in those dark details with our trace monotype. Making sure I have the neck. I'm pressing quite hard because we've got to go through all those layers. And you can cheat a little bit and look. To see if it's all taken up. Okay, just the beak for some reason hasn't. And oh, we haven't darkened this, so that helps. Okay, the back end. I thought I'd done that, but I guess I didn't. Better, okay. I think we've got it. All right. Now you'd think that would make a great print, and it would directly, so we'll print that off directly rather than put it on the gel plate, because you get that kind of thing happening, where it's just bubbles. Okay, we're doing the big reveal here. It looks pretty good. Let's have a look. And line everything up. And I'm just going to check it, make sure it looks pretty good. Now that should give us some details on our wildfowl here and our background. Putting lots of pressure on, you're trying to pick up those details. Now very likely I'm going to have to touch up some of the details with paint, like I did with this one. This was that one I did yesterday. So, and just going back into the black, and it's part of the process, so be prepared for that. Just have a nice little rigger brush handy. But we should be able to get a fair amount of detail so that you can actually do that. Yep. Yeah, it's not bad. So we picked up quite a bit more detail here on the background. You can add a little bit more tone. The cornfield is a bit better. And I can actually see all the details of the wildfowl. It could be a bit darker yet, but you know, it's not bad. Okay. So then the last part is just touching up. And I think with, you can do a ghost print probably of the rest of this, maybe with some rice paper or some deli paper. I will do that off camera and we'll show it at the end, because it may not pick up anything, but we'll see. So back to our palette, and we're just going to add a few little touches. Don't forget this paint is quite tacky, so use a little bit of your, and just rub it in there. Now everything lined up beautifully. That's because we've been doing exactly the same tracing and registering. You just have to be careful with your paint now. These last little touches are crucial. Now what I could do is add a little bit of burnt plate oil. I have that. This is linseed oil that's been reduced, that is oxidized for a while. And what it does is it will make printing inks a little more fluid. So that might help us with our brush here. It will make it dry a little more slowly, but at least it's a little bit more friendly in terms of painting. Much nicer. So that's like another little trick to remember. Now because we did the trace monotype, I've got a pretty good outline on here so that I know where everything is. So that's a big help. Of course you could do it with graphite or charcoal, but then you might have problems with it smudging. And this is good discipline now. It also gives you lots of skills. You're pulling in your painting, you're pulling in your drawing, and you're learning about oil painting, printmaking, so all to the good. I've given this one knobbly knees. Not deliberately, but there you are. Okay, so we're just going to add a few little details in the background hoodoos, just to give it some shape and some roundness. And our striations because we're doing this layer. we can leave it there and clear away some of this messy stuff. Well, it's been a challenge today. My voice isn't in the best of shape, but we have persevered and we've managed this whole process. I just love it. I think I'm going to carry on. And of course, wildfowl, is always present in this area. It's so beautiful and worth seeing, and get out there with your camera and, follow the migrations when you can. We just love doing that. We're going to be chasing pelicans shortly. They've gone back to the lake, so you'll see more pelican stuff in the future. As always, be sure to like and subscribe. Our channel is growing. Thank you so much. We really appreciate all the wonderful comments and the encouragement. It's always good, and this is why we do what we do. So, yes, carry on, with trace monotypes, whether you're just doing it on a plate or with your plexiplate or with your gel plate. It's all good and it all works. And you will, with practice, you'll get pretty good at this. So, and I'm still practicing, and I haven't done very much of this kind of thing before. So we're all sort of in the same boat. So, so take care. Be sure and, be kind to each other, especially in these terrible times. So, bye for now.